I need to talk to you about something in today's forecast that I have not been able to stop thinking about since I read it this morning. The Weather Prediction Center releases what's called an excessive rainfall discussion every day. It's one of the most technically detailed, least glamorous documents in American meteorology. Most people never read it. Most weather coverage never mentions it, but it is, in many ways, the most important safety document that no AA produces, because it describes exactly where the atmosphere is about to deliver more rain than the ground and drainage systems can handle. This morning's discussion, for the period covering Wednesday through Thursday of this week, contains a sentence I want to read to you directly. The WPC writes, "Backward trajectory analysis indicates that moisture around 3 kilometers above the surface originated in the tropical Central Pacific, advected into the southern U.S. by an anomalously strong subtropical jet stream at 300 millibar winds, around 60 plus knots, extending about 6,000 miles from the Marshall Islands to just south of Hawaii, all the way to Texas. This should push precipitable water values over the whole region above 7 inches, and above 2 inches in portions of Texas, which is quite unusual. 6,000 miles. The moisture pipeline feeding the storms about to hit central and southern Texas originates not in the Gulf of Mexico, which is the usual source, not in the Caribbean, in the Marshall Islands, in the central tropical Pacific Ocean, nearly the opposite side of the planet from Texas. A river of atmospheric moisture stretching 6,000 miles, driven by a subtropical jet stream running at more than 60 knots, pumping tropical Pacific water vapor directly into an atmosphere that is already drought-stressed, already primed for explosive storm development, and already carrying the institutional memory of what happened the last time conditions like this converged over central Texas. I'll come back to that memory in a moment, because it matters. And it is the reason that what is building for the end of this week deserves the most serious attention you can give it. Today is Tuesday, April 28th, 2026. Let's break this down. Before I get into the upcoming Texas setup, let me get you current on what is happening today, because Tuesday is not a quiet day. Scattered strong to severe thunderstorm development is possible Tuesday afternoon and evening in a corridor from the southeastern Great Plains into the lower Ohio Valley. More isolated severe storm development may extend into central and western Texas. A secondary shortwave trough is deepening across the central plains, and another surface low is developing near the Oklahoma-Texas Panhandle region. An elongated cold frontal zone will extend from the panhandles across eastern Oklahoma into the Mississippi and Ohio Valley. A new surface, low developing near the Oklahoma-Texas Panhandle. A cold front extending eastward. Scattered severe thunderstorms possible from the southeastern plains into the lower Ohio Valley. This is today, the continuation of the multi-day severe weather sequence that has been running since April 17th. The WPC's short-range forecast discussion from Monday, April 27th, confirms that a plume of very moist and unstable air continues to surge northward ahead of the front, which will set the stage for several days of severe weather and heavy rainfall across the mid to lower Mississippi valleys and mid-south. Critical fire weather conditions continue across the southern high plains. Above-average warmth continues for the central and eastern U.S. several days. That is the official WPC language for what the rest of this week looks like. Several days of severe weather and heavy rainfall. Not one event, not two. Several consecutive days of active weather targeting the same general corridor. And running alongside the severe weather, simultaneously on the western side of the same frontal boundary, critical fire weather conditions continue across the southern high plains. The dual disaster pattern I described in a previous video is still operating. East of the dry line, severe thunderstorms, large hail, tornado risk, flash flooding. West of the dry line, critical fire weather on drought-baked land with gusty winds and single-digit humidity. Both happening at the same time, in adjacent counties, in the same state. Now I need to walk you through what is building for later this week, because this is where the forecast takes a genuinely alarming turn. And it's a different kind of alarming than what we've been tracking all month. All month, the primary threats have been supercells, tornadoes, hail, and squall line winds. Those are the immediate, dramatic, radar-visible threats that produce tornado warnings and keep storm chasers busy and generate the viral videos of wedge tornadoes on the open prairie. And those threats have been very real, very deadly, very costly. What is building for the end of this week is something different, slower, less photogenic, and historically, when it occurs in a specific geography that I'm about to describe, far more deadly. A southern stream Pacific low will slowly track inland across Southern California, the Southwest, and the Four Corners states Thursday into Friday, spreading light to moderate low elevation rain and higher elevation mountain snow into the region. As this feature ejects eastward into the southern plains, it will begin to interact with a nearly stationary boundary draped roughly along Interstate 20 in Texas. Anomalous Pacific and Gulf moisture overrunning this frontal boundary combined with impressive dynamics and forcing from a strong upper jet will lead to the increasing potential for significant rainfall across central and southern Texas. a Pacific low ejecting east from the Four Corners into Texas, interacting with a stationary boundary along I-20. Pacific and Gulf moisture combining simultaneously in the presence of a strong upper jet, building what the WPC is already calling increasing potential for significant rainfall. Well, significant rainfall in central and southern Texas, over a landscape that is drought-baked, over terrain that is predominantly limestone bedrock with shallow soil that cannot absorb intense rainfall, in a region that the National Weather Service in Austin and San Antonio has already been issuing flash flood warnings for this past weekend. Flash flood warning issued April 26 by NWS Fort Worth for Tarrant County, with 2 to 3 inches of rainfall already fallen and life-threatening flash flooding ongoing across Fort Worth. Arlington, Irving, Grand Prairie, Euless, Bedford, Grapevine, Haltom City, Keller, and DFW International Airport. Fort Worth and the DFW Metroplex were under flash flood warnings over the weekend. And now, late this week, a significantly larger and more anomalous moisture event is building for the same general region. I want to spend time on this atmospheric river, this 6,000-mile moisture pipeline from the Marshall Islands, because I think it is the most scientifically remarkable element of this week's forecast, and it is directly relevant to how dangerous the rainfall event building for Texas could become. An atmospheric river is a concentrated filament of moisture in the atmosphere, essentially a river of water vapor flowing through the sky. They are most commonly associated with the Pacific coast, where they produce the Pineapple Express events that deliver heavy rain and flooding to California and the Pacific Northwest. They are less commonly talked about in the context of the central and southern U.S. But what the WPC is describing for Thursday, Friday in Texas is functionally an atmospheric river-type moisture feed, except this one originates not in the subtropical Pacific near Hawaii, but in the tropical central Pacific near the Marshall Islands, anomalous Pacific and Gulf. Moisture overrunning this frontal boundary combined with impressive dynamics and forcing from a strong upper jet will lead to the increasing potential for significant rainfall. Precipitable water values are pushed above 7 inches over the whole region and above 2 inches in portions of Texas. Precipitable water values above 2 inches in portions of Texas. Now let me explain what that number means for rainfall rates. Precipitable water, often abbreviated PW, measures how much water vapor is available in a vertical column of the atmosphere above a given point. It is essentially the total amount of rain that could fall if all the moisture in that column were wrung out. A PW value of 2 inches means that a thunderstorm drawing from that column has access to an extraordinary reservoir of moisture. And the key insight is this. When you combine a very high PW environment with a stationary or slow-moving forcing mechanism, a stalled front, a boundary, a slow-moving low, the same moisture column gets repeatedly tapped by successive rounds of convection. The atmosphere acts like a constantly refilling pitcher. Storm after storm draws from the same moisture pool, drops rain over the same area, and moves on only for the next storm to arrive and do it again. This is what produces catastrophic flash flooding. Not one intense storm, a succession of storms, training over the same geography, each delivering several inches of rain, hour after hour after hour. And Central Texas is not generic flat farmland that can absorb this kind of rainfall. It is the hill country. The Texas Hill Country is a geologically specific landscape with a very specific flooding mechanism that has produced some of the most catastrophic flash floods in American history. I need to talk about the Texas Hill Country specifically, because the terrain and geology of this region makes it uniquely, lethally vulnerable to exactly the kind of moisture event that is building for Thursday, Friday. Central Texas's proximity to the Gulf of Mexico provides abundant moisture, and the hill country's shallow limestone soil and steep slopes mean that when heavy rain hits, it cannot soak into the ground. Water runs off almost immediately, funneling directly into creeks and streams with extraordinary speed. Limestone bedrock, shallow soil, steep slopes. These three geographic facts transform the Texas Hill Country into what meteorologists and hydrologists call Flash Flood Alley, a region where rivers and streams can rise tens of feet in minutes, not hours, when intense rainfall occurs upstream. The Guadalupe River at Kerrville rose 32, 5 feet in just 5 hours during the July 2025 Central Texas floods. In Hunt, where the two branches of the Guadalupe River meet, the river gauge recorded a 26-foot rise in just 45 minutes. The river ultimately crested at 52 feet, the highest ever recorded at Hunt, surpassing previous records by nearly 12 inches. 26 feet in 45 minutes. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. Not 45 hours, not 45 minutes after the storm starts, 45 minutes. The Guadalupe River rose the height of a 2.5-story building in the time it takes to watch a television episode. The July 2025 Central Texas floods ultimately killed at least 135 people, at least 117 of them in Kerr County alone. The flooding was caused by a mesoscale convective vortex with enhanced tropical moisture. 6 flash flood emergencies were issued on the same day. 4 months' worth of rain fell in a matter of hours. 135 people in a single flooding event in Central Texas, less than 10 months ago. I bring up July 2025 not to be sensationalist. I bring it up because the atmospheric ingredients building for Thursday, Friday, anomalous Pacific moisture, a stationary frontal boundary, a 6,000-mile subtropical moisture feed, PW values above 2 inches, bear structural similarities to what produced the July 2025 event. They are not identical. The specific storm mode, the exact location of the stationary boundary, the degree of training convection, all of these details will determine whether what happens Thursday, Friday is a serious flooding event or something approaching catastrophic. But the similarity is real enough, and the WPC's language about increasing potential for significant rainfall over central and southern Texas is serious enough that the communities in the Hill Country, Kerrville, Fredericksburg, Bourne, Bandera, Mason, Hunt, Comfort, need to be thinking about this right now, not Thursday morning. Right now. Here's the additional dimension that makes this late week setup particularly complex and dangerous. The flooding threat and the severe weather threat are not separate events happening in different places. They are overlapping. The SPC Day 4-8 outlook notes that as the western U.S. trough approaches the southern plains Tuesday through Wednesday, a moist and unstable air mass should be in place. Some solutions suggest that a mid-level jet will move into the southern plains, which would create strong deep-layer shear over parts of the moist sector, suggesting that a substantial severe threat will be possible with supercells capable of large hail, severe wind gusts, and some tornadoes. Supercells with large hail and tornadoes in the same atmosphere that is simultaneously delivering anomalous moisture and flash flooding potential to central and southern Texas. This is the weather pattern that meteorologists call the loaded gun setup. The atmosphere is simultaneously unstable enough to produce violent rotating supercells and moisture-laden enough to produce catastrophic rainfall. The same storm that drops 3-inch hail on one neighborhood can produce 4 inches of rain in 30 minutes on another. The same squall line that generates 70 mile-per-hour winds can also train over the same river valley for 3 hours, delivering a week's worth of rain in an afternoon. The frontal boundary, draped roughly along Interstate 20 in Texas, will interact with the ejecting Pacific low and the anomalous moisture feed to produce multiple rounds of storms with high rainfall rates, supporting the potential for isolated instances of flash flooding. Flooding concerns may remain localized on Wednesday, but grow more significant as the moisture amplifies Thursday into Friday. Wednesday starts the process. Thursday and Friday are when it escalates. And I want to be specific about the geography because I think the I-20 corridor in Texas is one of the more underappreciated severe weather and flooding corridors in the country. That line runs east-west across Texas from Abilene through Fort Worth, Dallas, and into the Arklatex. Cities like Abilene, Midland, San Angelo, Fort Worth, Dallas, Tyler, all sitting near or on that I-20 line, all potentially in the corridor where the stationary boundary parks and the training storms develop. While Texas is the story that concerns me most heading into the end of this week, I want to make sure everyone in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic is not caught off guard by what is simultaneously building on the other side of the country. A growing signal exists for deeper coastal low development along the East Coast by the end of the week. Anomalous long-fetch Gulf and Atlantic moisture wrapping into New England will support a heavy rain threat with the potential for 1 to 3+ inches of rainfall for much of the Northeast. The coastal low stalls out later Friday into the weekend, allowing intensity to wane but keeping conditions cool, windy, and wet and unsettled through early next week. A little snow wrapping in on the back and colder side of the storm cannot be ruled out across the higher elevations of northern New England or the interior Northeast. A stalling coastal low, 1 to 3+ inches of rainfall for the Northeast through the weekend. Potentially snow at higher elevations of northern New England. After a week that has been almost exclusively focused on the central U.S., the Northeast is about to experience its own significant weather event. A coastal low with heavy rain, strong onshore winds, and the possibility of late-season snow in the interior. Boston, Providence, Hartford, New York, Philadelphia, Portland, all of them are going to be feeling this system through Friday night and into the weekend. Conditions remain cool, windy, and wet through early next week across the Northeast. For the Northeast, this is a multi-day event. Not a one-day rain and done. The stalling pattern that keeps coastal lows parked off New England for several days is the same pattern that drives the most impactful nor'easters. And while this is not a nor'easter in the classic winter sense, the dynamic of a stalling coastal low delivering persistent rain and wind to densely populated areas carries its own significant hazards. Coastal flooding, river flooding from already elevated stream flows, localized flash flooding in urban areas where drainage systems are saturated from the spring's above normal precipitation, If you live in New England or the Mid-Atlantic, this weekend is a weather weekend. Plan outdoor activities accordingly. Watch for flash flood watches in urban areas, Friday night through Sunday. I want to step back and name something that I think is the central irony of this entire spring season, and it has direct safety implications for the Texas and Southern Plains communities facing this week's rain events. The Central and Southern Plains have been in historic near-dust bowl-level drought all spring. Oklahoma at 99% drought coverage. Eastern Texas at the deepest moisture deficit in decades. The hill country parched, the limestone baked, the soil moisture essentially depleted. And into that drought-baked landscape, the atmosphere is now about to deliver its most anomalous moisture event of the entire spring. A 6,000-mile moisture pipeline from the Marshall Islands, PW values above 2 inches. A stationary front that could train storms over the same communities for hours. The July 2025 Texas Hill Country floods occurred in a region that had been in severe to exceptional drought for months before the rains came. Drought actually made the flooding worse. Drought-hardened limestone soil repels intense rainfall even more effectively than moist soil, funneling runoff directly into rivers and creeks rather than allowing any subsurface infiltration. The drought made the flooding worse. The very fact that the ground is so dry, so hardened by months without rain, means that when the anomalous moisture arrives, more of it becomes runoff. Less soaks in, more races off the limestone toward the rivers. The drought and the flood are not opposing conditions. In the hill country, they are complementary ones. The worse the drought, the worse the flash flooding when the rains finally come. This is weather whiplash. NOAA's Physical Sciences Laboratory describes weather whiplash as a syndrome that increases as a warming climate boosts hydrological extremes, increasing the impacts of drought through landscape parching heat, while also forcing more water to evaporate into the atmosphere, which raises the odds of intensified rainfall events, drought to flood, baked to inundated. The same landscape, the same communities, experiencing the worst of both extremes, sometimes within days of each other. This is not a forecast failure. This is not an anomaly. This is the documented, scientifically characterized signature of how an amplified water cycle operates in a warming world. More intense droughts, more intense rainfall events, more abrupt transitions between them, more weather whiplash. And right now, in late April 2026, the central and southern U.S. is experiencing all of it simultaneously. Before I close with action items, I want to take a moment and do something I don't do often enough in these forecast videos. I want to stop and just honestly account for what this spring has cost. The 2026 severe weather season through late April has confirmed 8 fatalities and 29 injuries in the April multi-day outbreak sequence alone. Some of the most devastating impacts hit Oklahoma and Michigan early in the season. In Oklahoma, an EF2 tornado near Fairview killed a mother and daughter on U.S. Highway 60, followed by additional tornadoes near Beggs and northern Tulsa that tore through homes, damaged a middle school, and left thousands without power. A mother and daughter on a highway in Oklahoma, gone in the time it took a tornado to cross a road. The 2025 Atlantic hurricane season saw no U.S. landfalls for the first time since 2015. But the 2025 weather year was defined instead by the Los Angeles wildfires at 61. $2 billion in damage, the deadliest tornado outbreak since 2011, and the July 2025 Central Texas floods that killed 135 people along the Guadalupe River, 135 people along the Guadalupe River. In one flooding event 10 months ago, communities that are still in recovery, communities where parents are still grieving children lost at summer camps, where entire families were swept away together, where search and rescue teams spent weeks searching the river for the missing. I mention this not to manufacture emotional weight. I mention it because it is the context in which we must understand what is building for this week. The same river, the same limestone terrain, the same flash flood alley, the same anomalous Pacific moisture mechanism, building again, 10 months later. This is why the forecast matters. This is why the 6,000-mile moisture pipeline from the Marshall Islands is not a meteorological curiosity, but an urgent safety communication. This is why I make these videos. Let me be direct about what each community needs to do based on what is building this week. For Central and South Texas, the Hill Country Corridor, the I-35 and I-10 corridors, the San Antonio to Austin to Waco corridor, for Thursday through the weekend. The most important thing I can tell you is this. If you live near any creek, river, or low water crossing in the Texas Hill Country, if you have ever seen that water move fast when it rains, you need to have a plan before Thursday morning. Not a vague plan, a specific plan. Know your elevation relative to the creek. Know at what rainfall amount the creek historically comes out of its banks. Know the route away from the water that does not require crossing a low water bridge. Know where high ground is that you can reach on foot if necessary. And know that in Flash Flood Alley, the time between it's raining upstream and the road you're on is underwater can be measured in minutes. Most flood deaths occur in vehicles. The Guadalupe River rose 26 feet in 45 minutes at Hunt during July 2025. Victims were found miles downstream from where they entered the water. Turn around, don't drown. That phrase exists because it describes the exact mechanism of the majority of flood deaths in Texas. Not people caught in their homes by rising water. People who drove into water-covered roads thinking they could make it through. You cannot see what is beneath water-covered roads. You cannot see whether the road surface is still intact. You cannot see the depth. 6 inches of fast-moving water can knock you off your feet. 12 inches can float a small car. 2 feet can carry away an SUV. And in the hill country, the current moves fast enough to turn a submerged vehicle into a battering ram within seconds. If you see water on a road this week, any road, anywhere, turn around. For the DFW Metroplex and I-20 corridor for Wednesday. Thursday, flash flood watches are likely for urban areas as the storm boundary sets up. Urban flooding in DFW has been a recurring issue this spring. Already confirmed flash flood warnings for Fort Worth and Arlington over the weekend. Underpasses, low-lying roadways, and drainage channels that fill fast. Know the ones in your commute route. Know the alternate routes that avoid them. For the Ark-La-Tex region, Northeast Texas, Southwest Arkansas, Northwest Louisiana, for Tuesday through Wednesday. The first round of this week's active weather is already affecting you. Training thunderstorms with 1 to 2 inch per hour rainfall rates are possible through this afternoon and tonight. The flood risk is real and is on top of ground that has already received multiple rounds of heavy rain this week. For the Northeast, Boston, Providence, Hartford, New York, Philadelphia, for Friday through Sunday. A stalling coastal low is going to deliver 1 to 3 plus inches of rainfall to the region with persistent onshore winds. Coastal flood advisories are likely for low-lying coastal areas. Urban flash flooding is possible in areas where stormwater systems are already at or near capacity. Plan outdoor events for early in the week rather than the weekend. For everyone in the severe weather corridor from the Texas Panhandle through Oklahoma and Kansas for Tuesday, Wednesday, keep your weather alerts on. The SPC's Day 4-8 guidance supports a substantial severe threat for the southern plains, with supercells capable of large hail and some tornadoes. The exact timing and positioning depends on the evolution of the shortwave and surface low. I will have more specific guidance as the event approaches. Here is where we stand. The severe weather machine that has been running since the first week of March is not finished. Today brings scattered severe thunderstorms from the southeastern plains through the lower Ohio Valley. Wednesday and Thursday bring the stationary boundary and the beginning of the anomalous moisture event in Texas. Thursday and Friday bring the full development of the 6,000-mile Marshall Islands to Texas moisture pipeline, with PW values above 2 inches. Training thunderstorms possible over the hill country, and the WPC flagging increasing potential for significant rainfall in the region that experienced one of the deadliest flash floods in modern American history less than 10 months ago. Several days of severe weather and heavy rainfall are expected over the mid to lower Mississippi valleys and Mid-South, with critical fire weather conditions continuing across the southern high plains. Severe weather to the east, fire weather to the west, flash flooding building in the center, a coastal low targeting the northeast by the weekend. The atmosphere is operating on all fronts simultaneously, attacking different regions with different hazards from the same large-scale pattern. The storms that have defined this spring have not just been dramatic weather events. They have been the expressions of an atmosphere that is carrying more energy, more moisture, and more instability than it has in decades, driven by a combination of record warmth, historic drought, a collapsing La Niña, and a building El Niño that climate scientists are comparing to the most powerful events of the modern era. This is not over. It was never going to be over quickly. The storm train keeps running. The moisture pipeline keeps filling. The pattern keeps cycling. But the people in its path, the ranchers and families and children in the Texas Hill Country, the commuters on the I-20 corridor, the communities in the Ark-La-Tex still recovering from last week's severe weather, the New Englanders watching a coastal low approach on a Friday afternoon, all of them deserve to be informed, prepared, and safe. That is why I make these videos. And today's video is the most important one I've made this week. Turn around, don't drown. Know your shelter, keep your alerts on. I'll see you in the next update.